If you've been following the last 8 to 10 years, there's been a lot of focus by the Indian government and the private sector looking at India. I think there have been a couple of factors for that. One, India wanted to get into the manufacturing world, and then we've had a lot of issues, geopolitical issues that have made India a decently attractive destination for that. So with me today, I have Nivriti, who is the CEO of Invest India. She spent pretty much her entire life at Intel, over 3 decades. We have Manoj, who's the Chief Operating Officer of Juniper Networks, pretty much a key champion of the internet space. My name is Bharat. I'm a global partner with Kearney, and I'll be the moderator today. I'll try to keep my comments to the minimum and let these two champions of the industry talk about some things. So what exactly?
For the third panelist, you can ask questions and answer.
No, I plan to share them with you, but that was a nice one. So we'll break our hour into 3 topics. One about why should somebody even look at India, what India is doing, and what India has done. And specifically, the first 2 are around manufacturing, and the third one is more about India as a talent pool and why that talent pool matters. And sometimes we even hear, especially from the India policymakers, they don't want to be replicating what China did. They want to do something different. Now, I'm not going to give it away to you what that is, but we will let Nivriti answer. So before we get started, let me start off with a very simple question to both of them. What is India's potential as a high-tech manufacturing destination? So maybe I'll pass it to both of you.
Okay. So, as all of you know, India has been a consumer-driven economy. Very much like what United States has been. And sometime during the last, couple of decades, the realization dawned that India is significantly missing manufacturing. And it's also a belief that manufacturing drives a lot of jobs. So what India started doing is, how do we get ready to drive manufacturing out of India? Just to let you know, Bharat has already told you 30 plus years with Intel. I understand semiconductors. And I know that from design perspective, I can tell you, for semiconductor design, 20% of semiconductor designers are from India. I also must tell you, and I have said that a few times, some of you may be hearing it twice from me, is India is synonymous to software. And when it comes to semiconductor design, there is embedded software, there's different kinds of software. So my belief is in R&D and design, we are already there. What do we do for manufacturing? So India is trying to, as a country, become competitive. To become competitive to some of the neighboring countries who are doing better in manufacturing, India said, okay, let me provide some incentives. Why incentives? Because the supplier cluster, the supplier ecosystem is not as well established. So till we get the supplier ecosystem well established, we might have to import. And if we are importing, the cost goes haywire for the investor. So let me, as a country, give investment and make the country competitive. Now the second is the ability for skill-based competition. And what we are looking for is, I have honestly said it many times, I think India is the best learner. Why else do you think Indian CEOs, including my friend, here, Manoj, is working in a company, Juniper? We have CEOs of Indian origin in Australian companies, in UK companies. Why? Because we quickly learn the culture. Not only we quickly learn the culture, we have education as, a primary DNA. Ever since a child is born, the one dream Indian mother has is, how do I educate my child? How do I educate my child? So I think learning is part of our DNA. So if we have design already known to us, our government is providing incentives to address the shortfall as a country that we have, we will in no time partner with the investor and learn those manufacturing capabilities. In semiconductor, I can tell you 15% is human resource that is required. Rest, 85% is split between equipment and raw materials. So now we are talking about equipment that, whether you set up a fab in United States or Australia or Switzerland, it's the same. Now, what is the difference? Is in the raw materials and the suppliers. So what India is trying to do is when it is building its incentive plan, it's saying that I am going to come up with a plan that draws the suppliers also. So the way I look at it is if I'm going to attract a Juniper, I'm going to flip his bill of material and try to draw all of the raw materials, the top layer, the second layer, the third layer, such that Juniper finds it very attractive to bring its manufacturing, its capabilities into India. So India is getting ready, and I believe that in the next 2 to 3 years, we would have established our manufacturing capability for multiple segments. I'm really excited about pharma. I'm really excited about biosimilars within pharma. I'm excited about, medical equipment. I'm excited about, building laptops, desktops, even servers after phones. I'm excited about putting a car together and slowly, working our way towards indigenizing the building blocks. So I think India has realized manufacturing is important, and whether it's from government, whether it's from regulators, whether it's from, creating incentives or partnering with sovereign funds, we're looking at all possible ways to bring in manufacturing into India. Very long answer.
Always
Very
wonderful, wonderful to hear from you each time. There is a couple of new learnings for me. So let me start with Juniper Networks and our perspective on manufacturing by going back in time. So 20 years ago, we were one of the first companies who embarked upon building soup to nuts platforms, hardware, software, silicon, everything in our routers and switches in India 20 years ago. So we took the bold step, and even today, we are one of the very few companies in India who invested in R&D from a top to bottom. A lot of companies invest from a staff augmentation fashion, extension of system test, backend, BPO. We said, you know what? If you're going to invest in a new area, new territory, we want to make sure that it's a fully functional place. It's not like half-assed, right? So that's one of the big things we did. And I'm proud to say that, like, for instance, my R&D team is about 4,000 people. 3,000 of them are in India. All of our products, 90% of our products have some touch in India. So we're already pretty well established in terms of the ecosystem and figuring out how to build products here. But the point here is entirely different, right? So we're talking about software systems, design, and everything. But when I talked to Nirvati about that, that's history. When we're talking about manufacturing here, Manoj. So let me come to manufacturing, right? So for me, I took the risk. I was one of the first two people who actually we had put a small company called Allegros Networks at the time, 20 people team, and now it's a 2,000 people team. So we are ready to take the step, invest, take the risk, not a problem at all. So for me, in terms of manufacturing, of course, we all know the big shift that's happened over the last couple of years. There is a drive towards more friendshoring, naturally, and without going into details, what that means. And I think that has kind of triggered a little bit. But I also will tell you hesitation, when we had looked at this in the past, that okay, if you're going to friendshore and move from some other, some big place to some other places, there's a lot of countries to look at. And everybody's providing incentives, and the question was, do we have a manufacturing capability in India which can scale up to the complexities of some of the products we're creating, and in some cases, the scale of the products. And I think the recent iPhone announcement has actually changed the game for many people. Apple can do that, it's great. But then we still have a few more, aspects we need to plan out, like, do we have that supplier ecosystem, the incentive models, if you still import stuff, what does that mean to us? In terms of starting something in manufacturing, it's a capital intensive thing. Starting something in software, not as capital intensive, right? So for hardware, for something to be reasonably viable, you've got to have at least $100 million per year of cogs, basically something built in a particular new installation in a country or wherever, so that it can be cost effective for us from a manufacturing operations perspective. So we've got to get to a minimum of 100 million. So in which case, it's a significant investment to start the work with the contract manufacturer. Whether it's a Sanmina, Flextronics, Foxconn, whoever, right? They also ask for a minimum amount of investment to start with. So that bootstrapping is where you're going to get a little bit of challenge. I think you rightfully said that there is a lot of incentives you're going to provide to attract people. That bootstrapping is going to be pretty vital. And I visited an hour and a half from Chennai. What's the location called for Foxconn and Flextronics is? Also, I think Sri City. Maybe not Sri City. That is near. Anyway, someplace. Yeah, that's right. That's right. So they have 20, 25 buildings. Foxconn, Flextronics has a similar number of buildings, and they have started building complex stuff there. I actually saw the whole line. Getting impressed. It's getting there. It's still, just to be super frank, right? When I visited Taiwanese factory or a factory in China versus here, it's still not there. It's nascent, but it's significantly better than what it was 5 years ago. Let me put it that way. So I have aspirations, and I think this is good. If the right incentives are provided and the right motivations are there, I think this is going to be good. And you probably touch this topic later, but I want to kind of touch. One of the things which drove the consumers, drove the manufacturing spend in China is that the Chinese economy also buys a lot, right? The internal spending was pretty high. So there was always a incentive right there where, okay, you can open up a new market for us. So it's not the same yet in India, for companies like us and others, right? So I think, we've got to change that. I'm hopeful because there's more and more affluency in India now, expected to be 100 million people are going to be called affluent in India in another 3-4 years. So that actually will change the equation. But I think we're looking for, seeing all those patterns. But I think I'm ready to take a big step with the right incentives and stuff. I'll also tell you, my parents are from Cochin, Kerala, so we have some balanced cars, in terms of unions and stuff like that. So there is that, China is unions. Anyway, so let me just a lot of stuff, but I think very interested in moving forward, but would like to see some of the potholes removed.
Well, both your comments were very insightful and gave me time to breathe after I ran along the way. But I do have some follow-ons to both of you before we move to our next topic. So, Manoj, maybe I take on you very quickly. You talked about, and I've heard you speak about how proud you are about your R&D in India. There was a time it was not there. You guys decided to do it. What was the thinking at that point of time? What gave you the confidence? And there's a reason for that. I want to manufacture. What will it take, not from India, but from you sitting in Silicon Valley, in your boardroom? What will it take in the boardrooms to make a call? Is it that, Micron showing up out there, Apple showing up out there, Foxconn showing up out there, and a bunch of others? Is it going to be let's wait and watch? Or is there something specific being discussed in these boardrooms that how do we look, why should we look at India? Or India is a destination? I know it's a long-winded question, but you get the sense.
There's a couple of questions in that. Now, one was more of a personal question, or for people like me, why software and why that may be different from this. The second one is what's the topic in the boardrooms, right? First, I'll tell you, in the 2000 timeframe, 2003, 2004 timeframe, every boardroom, the conversation was, how do you outsource to India? So there was a kind of a sort of a tailwind, I would say. If you didn't go present to the board, then you had a plan to outsource to India. Sixth, in terms of conversion between a US paid employee and an India paid employee. So the math worked, the logic worked, and then the personal question to me was, I worked for a brief period, like 3-4 months before I went to the US. One thing I can tell you, maybe it's the schooling, to your point, and everything, or maybe it's the course curriculum or the logical thinking, or maybe Indians are crazy. All of it together. Software, even in those days, the bridge is not too big a bridge. And even for me, you're programming in a procedural language, you go to another procedural language, you're programming object-oriented stuff, go to other oriented stuff, you're programming microprocessors, you're doing something else, billion routers and switches. the bridges wasn't too far. The bridge was near. So you could experiment with a little bit of confidence. That's one. So the boardroom thing and this thing was much more than this time. So now let me contrast it with what's happening right now. Contrary to what people may think, the boardroom topic is not outsourcing to India. The boardroom topic is manufacturing, outsourcing away from China, right? So there's a lot of people competing for that, right? Right from Mexico, South American states, South American countries to many places in India, from in Asia, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam. So, and everybody's putting incentives out there to make it happen, right? This was not the case for the software. There was nobody in Latin America who was raising up their hands like we had tons of software engineers. There was nobody in Vietnam saying tons of software engineers. So that was by far an easy win. So this one is a little bit more complicated. So which is why I think you need to have some more incentives. And even now, I'll tell you the boardroom conversation, while want to move from China slowly and steadily, or move from Taiwan slowly and steadily, it's not reached the point where you're going to do it tomorrow. So I'll also say that. But I think the bigger thing is basically lots of choices. Which one do you pick? And I think India has an opportunity because of the talent pool. I solidly believe that. It is the opportunity if the government can provide certain confidence for people in the US, that the manufacturers in the US, that the infrastructure will be there. It'll be a long-term commitment. It'll be free of some trade unions and stuff like that, and the quality of the product. Because the iPhone moment was a big moment, I can tell you that. Because iPhone is a product of high quality, it's large volume, so you can do high quality and large volume. So that is a clear message we all heard. So Micron has moved. We are willing to move to. I think it'll be good to get us a little bit more incentive to cover these things which you're not familiar with, and to contrast with the Vietnams and Malaysia and Indonesia, who's saying that the cost is going to be cheaper than China when you do it with us, right? So it's tough. So.
Thank you, Manoj. Nivriti, I have a different kind of question for you. So we hear all the time people sitting in the valley or in Germany or somewhere that you don't have the ecosystem that China has. And I've heard you talk to, and you alluded to this, inverting the bill of material approach. Help us understand what is this inverted bill of material approach mean?
I kind of said in my first question, but let me explain again. I'll take the example of a semiconductor, and I'll take the example of my own ex-company, Intel. So Intel builds transistors. Many transistors make an IP. Many IPs make a processor, and many processors, many IPs make a complete solution which you put on a board. So when you think of a phone, there is a board, there is a CPU, there is memory, there is I/O, there is graphics, there is connectivity, there's audio. So a whole lot of these building blocks that go make that board. So when I think of, Intel has to build a fab here, I'm thinking the transistor. I'm thinking transistor getting, designed on a wafer. And to do that, whole lot of things are required. Power, water, and a facility. Beyond that, there are many, many small things. Many gases, many chemicals, many equipments. So my thought was, if India doesn't have the supply ecosystem, how do I bring them? Bring the easiest guy. Let's say I need a particular chemical, a very clean component of a chemical that I need. I will bring that person in, and I'll see, is that chemical required for, iron ore or steel kind of production? I want to create a business around that raw material. I'll bring the other raw material. I'll bring many other raw materials that Intel needs. In fact, when I visited Manoj in my last trip, I went and visited, many other companies. One of the companies I asked, who are your critical suppliers that I must draw into India to make it very attractive for you to come to India? And believe me, they know the India story is sold, that India is growing at 6-7% and perhaps can accelerate to 8% also. So everybody knows that, but they are trying to help us establish that these are the critical supplies you don't have, bring them on board. So me as Invest India, me and my team, and of course my partners, are looking at how do I bring those suppliers into India which are critical for a company. So inverted bill of material means the main company, I'm just going to make it up, Intel is going to come later, but there are a whole bunch of suppliers that need to come. And I will work with Intel to say, who are your most critical suppliers that you need proximity with, without whom it's not going to be very viable business. So I start drawing those. I actually not just start bringing them from somewhere else into India, I actually spur innovation in the local ecosystem, drive startups. The mid-sized company, add this into your product because guess what? Another company needs it. So all different ways we try to address that gap. And our goal is, one point of time, I want to see supplier clusters mapped into India. Just like you see all of those colorful states. If you're an automotive, go to Maharashtra, go to Telangana. If you are a pharma company, definitely consider Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. So you will have a very clear picture of the supplier ecosystem and whichever company you are, even if it is a shoe manufacturing company, where should you land? Which is that state which has the largest supplier ecosystem? Who are the states who are giving you good incentives? So now, after Bharat's question to me, that we were a consumer economy, now we are getting into manufacturing. We have design-linked incentives, now we have production-linked incentives, and we have covered very many sectors to look at, how do we make ourselves more competitive, that people like, Juniper, who are already doing so much R&D, bring their manufacturing here. And we want to work with them. In fact, my first conversation with Bharat was, Niriti, do you know why you should work with me? Because I do really good should-cost modeling. I'm saying, okay, how do we leverage you? So our thought was, day one, Juniper comes. Juniper is, building a product that it needs a lot of imports from. So today we do the math with his imports that I try to offset with incentives. But in 3 years, he says, if you build a local supplier, this is how your cost will go down. So he will model that cost for me and say, okay, in 3 years, you better get the local supplier on for him because he might lose the incentive in 3 years or 5 years. And the should cost modeling will give me a deadline to work this local supply ecosystem. So we are looking at various ways of building indigenously, importing, bartering, licensing, bilateral, multilaterals. I'm really excited about, countries like Japan, for example, in semiconductors. Japan is a country which has lots of strength, but the one weakness is its aging population, strong in technology. India, a young population, doesn't have technology, has hunger, tremendously good in software and scale. So Japan and India can partner. South Korea and India can partner. US can partner. Many countries can partner who have a vision of population scale good. If you are looking at larger good, India is a country to partner with. And the other thing I can say and always believe, 30 years I was with Intel, not once did any IP of Intel got leaked. Which is to say that if you think India, trust is the second name that comes very close to India. I have never seen any IP leak. I have never seen architecture of Intel get exposed. Such kind of things may have happened in other countries, but definitely not here. So all of those pitches I take with cost modeling, with incentives, with partnerships, with bilateral, multilateral, and I'm trying to see how to make India attractive, despite the fact that there may be some gaps, but I'm willing to look at how do we address those.
Thank you, Nimriti, and thank you for the kind words. So you both touched upon incentives, and I want to move to that, but I have two different questions for you. So Nimriti, I've heard a lot about India, where we have incentives for production. The PLI has been marketed very well. There are capital incentives, there are IT incentive, design incentives. I would love you to kind of, in a very simple manner, just explain what those incentives are. What are federal incentives, what are state incentives, and how they work. Manoj, I want to come to you with a different topic. You already mentioned that the countries have to provide incentives. So instead of making, you could actually say, hey, this is what I would like from India too. But would be good for you to share best practices from around the globe. And if you feel uncomfortable talking about specific countries, just share what are the best practices that people come to you or countries come to you and they say, hey, this is something you do, and you're like, that was very interesting and innovative that these guys did. So this is how I would like to set up the next section of the conversation. So maybe Nimriti, you set the stage for India, and then Manoj will take it up.
So there are 14 unique product linked incentives that India has. And if I summation it, it's about 30 to 40 billion dollars. I'm going to give you the example of semiconductors. In semiconductors, we have $10 billion of incentives to bring in a fab 28 nanometers or newer. Now, what a company can get is, if a company is spending X amount of dollars, the central government will also give the same amount. Not only that, you go to the state, you get another 25%. So overall, for establishing a fab, 28 nanometer or newer, 75% of the cost that the company will incur will be paid through the incentives. And this is not after the fact. This is the first time, what is that term called? Parity. Thank you. We will be giving this incentive upfront. And this has been the case with Micron, and this is going to be the case with any other semiconductor establishment that wants to invest in India. So what I want to say is, there is dollar-related incentives, there is land-related incentives, power. A semiconductor needs continuous power. 350 megawatt is a requirement for a typical fab. 1,000 acres of land for a typical fab. And water, we did the calculation, 150,000 people drinking water daily is a requirement for a fab. Now, the state government can say, I'm gonna, provide you the land, and I'm gonna enable you with continuous supply of power and water. That's a huge incentive. So, in addition, the one thing that Sid and I actually worked while we were with Intel is aggregation of demand. You have to look at any industry end to end, from the design, conceptualization, all the way to product and the market. So we call it end-to-end development. So you talked about the whole IP, the fab, the packaging, the board, the software, the product is ready, but who's going to buy it? So we have worked on aggregating demands and building to those demands. That's that, when we have, you eat your own dog food, verify, fix the quality, and then start. You can never only build for your own country. So build in India, but build for the world is the strategy that we are working towards. So a whole lot of incentives. This is product linked. We have even got design linked incentives, especially for IPs. So the government is really looking very holistically and actually partner with private sector to build these incentive programs.
Maybe I should touch upon one more question. What does the government want in return?
The government is focusing on certain sectors. Semiconductors are very important. As you're going digitalization, more and more is going to be the requirement of semiconductor. And we all witnessed, there was a time when a $2 microcontroller was making a $100,000 Mercedes sit in the parking lot because those microcontrollers were not available. So we know that your life almost comes to a standstill if you don't have these building blocks. To me, these are the basic building blocks of digitalization. So what government wants is, with so much digitalization, India should have a capability of semiconductor and building its own microprocessors. Not that it's not going to use other microprocessors, but it wants to build its capabilities. Because I really feel this is the basic ingredient. You think of cloud, you think of phone, you think of automotive, you think of network, everything. Like even, power electronics that are going inside car batteries. So everywhere you see semiconductors, you turn your, wiper on or off or your window on or off, there is a semiconductor behind that. So India wants to build semiconductors, and it was kind of slow in reacting to manufacturing. Now it's woken up and nice and bright.
Thank you. Manoj, going to your questions about best practices.
Yeah. Now, one thing is to be clear to the audience, and especially to you guys, but is that we actually don't manufacture directly. We work with contract manufacturers. Juniper, doesn't matter. Most companies in Silicon Valley work with contract manufacturers of scale, like Infrasonic, say Foxconn, sometimes Sanmina, Celestica. There's call it like 10 companies. That's about it. And they all have, from fabs to all the contract manufacturing facilities in different places, mostly in China, once upon a time, some in Taiwan. And over the last 10 years, some of them have started building up other places too. Nearshoring to US in Mexico, and non-China but close to China places like Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, and whatnot. So all of them, when they saw the geopolitical headwinds, they said, okay, we want to diversify, we want to help you. All of them came to us. And so these are the places we will going to. So we will get you off these two places over a period of time. Not every day, but over a period of time. But all of you also know that resistors and capacitors still come from China as a manufacturer. Right? But they all said, we're doing this and we're helping you out. But none of them came and said, we're going to do India, or we're doing India, and you can choose India. So I think there is a gap there, which I'm still curious as to find out, what's the gap, right? Because when we say, we want to invest IGT as a foundation of Foxconn, as well as Flex, so to start a new thing, new line, there is a startup cost of $10 million at least for us. And, at this point, we've decided, Malaysia and Vietnam, all those places, and you have to make it happen. So it would be really good for us to get these manufacturers to come and say, well, this will start a cost, or you guys figure out how to do that. And then I don't have any resistance. The only person is you still need to get past, what we talked about, power and all that stuff, but everybody already has plans. The state government and all those guarantees, right? And you also have an iconic Apple brand saying that it's okay, that it's okay for everybody else. So, but to me, it's just a startup cost. I think that's the only thing from that perspective.
So, Manoj, I want to move to a different topic now. India as a market. You alluded to this in the beginning, that China became successful because it took a market. So, I set it up and then I'll ask the same question to do everything from an India angle. So, India has spent a lot of time on investments on digitization, whether it's the UPI or digital payments. I mean, we hear all those stories. They are making international press. It's pretty amazing at what speed it was done. None of that stuff happened without your stuff. So give us a little flavor for when you are sitting in your company from an executive's view, is India an attractive market? What does the market need to be for it to be an attractive market? And maybe I throw a little math question at you. How big is it has to be for somebody like your company to say, we cannot just treat this as another region. It is very, very important with 20% of the world population sitting out there. It's a market. So give us your views.
Yeah, this is a very interesting question. I'll try to navigate without giving exact numbers and stuff like that.
That's fine.
If that is okay. So I'll give you a scale of our business. We have $5.5 billion of revenue per year. The revenue we make from India is $700 million. Right? So there is a big difference, right? And when everybody went to China, the scale was different. It's a third of the business, or not third, maybe 1/5 of the business, or 1/6 of the business from China. Right? So the scale is different. So to push, say, the board needs to make this decision, less than 100 million doesn't even come to the needle, right? So that's one challenge. So, and traditionally, I think it's been again, I cannot like fully blame it all on India because for us, the business strategy in go-to-market was heavily focused on certain regions, predominantly US, then EMEA, and then Japan. India probably didn't invest that much and we didn't have the right product except for India too, which has changed over a period of time. So now, India business has grown like 20% year over year for the last 2 years. Still not 100 million, but it's grown. So we are investing more, but there is also a couple of mega trends happening. I think in earlier case, it was always this, tenders. Tenders were the lowest cost wins, and I think, who knows who makes a huge difference in the lowest cost, reverse auctions and all this stuff, right? Not going into details. So the more transparency and more meritocratic that process is, you're going to have a thriving ecosystem. People would love that. I think there's still a little bit of concern about like, okay, technically we're the best solutions, but we were not picked because of XYZ reason by the public sector. That's still there. And I think it's time to move away from all that stuff and make it truly meritocratic. And I think that makes a huge difference. It's a huge incentive. It's not just Juniper. Hundreds of companies will come because sometimes they don't want to question the bellwether. The startups or the mid-sized companies don't want to question the bellwether because the bellwethers have a kind of a chokehold on some of the state or local stuff. So if you can change that, it'll change the business into an investment environment. Second, the tailwind I was talking about was, I think India is beginning to invest heavily into AI clusters, AI data centers. It's probably one of the first times where India is actually investing right at the beginning of a, inflection. Usually India, it's a little bit behind in terms of investing on inflection. So, it seems like, there's a lot of business to be had now. So I think if the invest in their team, connects with those big financial institutions and the big, healthcare institutions and whatnot who have decided, okay, we're going to do everything here in a local data center in India. We're talking about huge investments, and of course power too, but huge investments in dollars, GPUs to servers to storage to networking. So there is a budding market coming there. So that could be the incentive, you can provide to the manufacturers like us. Here is a XYZ business for those people who are willing to invest in India. You're going to have a preference for you guys or something like that. So that could also help. So I think if you can remove that sort of cloud which is hanging over people that only the bellwethers, they have some indirect connections and that's why they give the big deal. Upstarts or mid-sized companies, it's very tough to really get to that right level in India. Can remove that, provide the right incentive for manufacturing and encourage the Indian-born companies who are investing in AI and whatnot. When State Bank of India was like second largest bank in the world right now, I would think. They're investing in data centers, and if you can connect those pieces together, there's a big opportunity. So I think this is where I think private sector, public sector, and policymakers all three need to work together to make this happen.
So Manoj, the whole tailwinds around AI, I think that's Nivrithi's favorite topic. So you just set up the next question.
You may have wanted it or not.
No, that's a good thing.
Too late.
So Nivrithi, maybe I'll overload your question.
At the market part also.
That's where I'm going.
Yes.
So you are an ambassador for India to the Western world and the manufacturing world. Tell us why we should look at India and also allude to some things that most people don't get to read in the New York Times or the Wall Street or the Financial Times. So that's my first question. You can allude to digital and all. And I know AI is your favorite topic. I'm not going to say anything more than that, but also talk about where Manoj was going. What does India have to offer from an AI perspective versus just the skill? What else does India have, and why should people look at that as a call it an incentive that would motivate people?
Okay. So first I'm going to start with market. I was like thinking in my mind, start with today. The installed capacity of data centers is 700 megawatt. In the next few years, we're going to double it. But let me tell you the semiconductor requirement. The world's semiconductor requirement today was 600 billion. India is a 30 billion. But the world will see by 2030, 600 billion go to a little over a trillion. But let me tell you what India will go to. So I told you data center is doubling its capacity in the next few years. Semiconductor is going to go 10x, from 30 billion to 300 billion by 2030, 2031. So clearly there are plans, clearly there is dependence on semiconductors on many of these things. The other thing I can tell you is India is really pushing on renewable power. 500 gigawatt, of which 350 will be from solar. So India is looking at, power. India is looking at semiconductor. India actually has a renewable power ministry. India has a water ministry. Because we all know, like I said, 150,000 people's drinking water is water semiconductor needs per day. And then you have to also look at using that water and, going through the recycling process and bring it back to create, not create a lack of water. So all of that India is already thinking. In terms of consumers, I want to tell you, in the last 10 years, the middle class spending capacity has doubled. Not only that, each year, India adds 30 million people to its middle class. 30 million, just for your understanding, is the size of New Zealand plus Australia. Gets added each year. So India should be looked not just for its capability of design, capability of manufacturing, but also as a market. So I really feel that India has arrived. India has a market that's willing to spend. And I'll tell you, a lot of these, Bharat likes to call it democratization of technology, government has enabled through building these platforms. And it so excites me. I just love humanity and people. When I see a really small vendor using a QR code to make you pay him 10 rupees for a bun that you're buying. Imagine the access now he has to the market because he has that QR code. The other thing, we never had in India the luxury of everybody carrying the plastic. So people had wallets full of notes. With this digital payment, phone is all you need. The amount of mobile-driven services, whether it is health, whether it's bank transaction, whether it's buying groceries, whether it's making all kinds of payments, this is the device you need. And India has what is called JAM Trinity, which is bank account, biometric authentication, and a device. And it lends you so many services because India has worked on expanding its network to the rural areas. The government has what's called BharatNet, which is an optical fiber that has been laid. Government has created digital literacy, so people know how to use their phones. There's so many value add items through this that government has enabled. So that is how the middle class spending capacity has doubled. And aspirational value has gone out of the roof. Why do you think Apple is being manufactured? Because people want to buy an Apple. And I do remember a time when Steve Jobs said Apple was not for India. He said that, and I'm sure he's changing his mind in wherever he is. And everybody has the aspiration. People are looking at different business models, but they want to own an iPhone. So that's how middle class is growing. That's how the market is growing. Now on AI, I honestly believe since at Intel I have actually built AI, I know not only how to build AI, to use AI. India has millions, like at least 4 million software designers and software engineers. India has 18% of the world population. Each person is a data factory. And you all know the raw material for AI is data. And AI is accurate when you have volume of data, when you have variety of data, and when you have depth into data. And India has all of that. On top, it's a democratic nation which works towards larger scale good. During the pandemic, I was so proud when India decided to help the neighboring nations with vaccines. Not only give the vaccines, but through the COVID platform, again, software. What I love about the change that, something triggered in India's mind, that India was building software for Microsoft, for Google, for Amazon's, everybody else. India said, I have built software prowess. I'm going to build these national level platforms to enable people to build innovations on top of it. And what I'm happy about, that even established industries are leveraging these national level platforms to drive innovation. So India is offering data, India is offering software, India has a lot of mathematics and analytics capability. I really believe that with data and with people and the open mindset, India is going to be leading with AI. And I honestly, everybody says AI is the new electricity, this, that, you can think of whatever. But the world of tomorrow is not going to be calculating oil as the metric for wealth. It will be looking at data as the metric for wealth, because data is going to be translated into information, and information will be translated into value. So, the journey of oil to data has already begun, and I think India has a big role to play.
Thank you, Nimriti. So I'm looking at the phone for a 10 o'clock marker. We have a few minutes. I want to put my last question to both of you. Same question, different angles. What are one or two success stories that you look at India? Manoj, for you, that gives you the confidence sitting in a boardroom and say, you know what, I can bring my manufacturing to India. And Nimriti, the same question for you. What is that makes you proud to see that somebody who probably was skeptical, you can already give a hint to that, now they are manufacturing and it's putting India on the global map. But I'm going to overload your question with one more. We have seen the Foxconns, the Flexes of the world set centers in India. When do we see a global level Indian contract manufacturer? So these are two questions. Maybe Manoj.
Yeah, it's a tough one to kind of single out the success story.
You can take two.
No, when I say single out, it's, we know the ones which is already public, so you cannot talk about the ones which are, not public yet. So I think one thing which has come, with the semiconductor stuff and what Apple is doing, and even some companies like Nokia building some, once upon a time, handsets and now some 3G equipment, we have clearly seen that anything which is pretty well defined and then mass production, I think India is getting there. Now the question is, if it doesn't have the massive scale and it's complex, would the infrastructure be ready to do that? I think that's the single biggest vector for me. This is a company which has, which produces 100,000 products, 100,000 in volume for a particular product, but very complex product and high margin and high, call it a high ASP product, versus Apple is an exception, but call it like a 10,000 ASP product, $10,000 ASP product, or $50,000 ASP product, or a $100,000 ASP product. But you probably won't have a 10 million of them. You probably will have 100,000. So having a complex manufacturing, not at massive scale, but at reasonable scale, I think that would be a pivotal moment for many companies, in my opinion.
Thank you.
I'll give you one success story, and it's very recent, so therefore, I'm going to narrate it. Very recently, I was invited to Sri City near Chennai, to inaugurate Daikin's new manufacturing plant. And people who know Japanese know that it is very difficult for a Japanese company to trust anybody else but its own people and its own country. And I'm really happy to tell you that Daikin started with manufacturing components in Nimrana near New Delhi, and complex parts like compressors were not built in India because they never believed that India has the capability. But I'm really happy to tell you that in Sri City, they are building compressors, not just for the air conditioners that go into India, but the air conditioners that go out of India, that are being exported out of India. So I really was very excited that, and the amount of thanks, those people were saying that you guys helped with policies, you helped with the support. Sri City has, oh, by the way, Sri City is built in a manner that, you will see many things are ready. Like a shell is ready, you go and house yourself, and you'll have to do much less work because everything is kind of plumbed and ready for you based on the power requirement, based on different other requirements that you may have. So Daikin was a very good story. The other good story that I really like is Apple. It has happened. Micron. It has happened, and I can tell you, I've seen, and in many of the children's books, I learned that drawing the first person is hard. Drawing the second person is even harder. But then third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, third. So I'm really, really hoping with Micron, we have the one. There will be hard work for all of us here to bring the second. But then I can assure you, the third, fourth, fifth will follow. And my belief, and I will bring in Manoj also into India. My belief is in the next 5 years, Bharat, I'll have a lot of struggle to tell you the successful stories.
That's such an inspiring and a beautiful comment. So with this, I want to thank both Manoj, you and Nivriti. Manoj for all the wisdom and experiences, and Nivriti for such an inspiration and the opportunity that India provides. I mean, of course, I was born in India, I live in the US, but it's such an inspirational and opportune moment in time. I think the next 5 to 10 years are going to be very interesting from a global perspective. So I thank everybody for coming here and listening to the great thoughts by both Manoj and Nivriti. So with this,
Thank you, Bharat.
close the session.